Hi everyone, so today in the Analects of Confucius 7.8, we'll be discussing more about Confucius's teaching method, and that is to not have the teacher replace the student's effort and give the answers out, or at least guide the student not too early and not too late, but exactly at the right time. And so Confucius thinks that learning is actually mostly the student instead of the teacher feeding the student every single piece of information. The teacher instead only gives out something, and that might not even be the entire answer only when the student is struggling. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. 7.8. The master said, I will not give a person a boost or a start if he does not know the frustration of trying to solve a difficult problem or the frenzy one would get into when trying to put an idea into words. After I have shown a student one corner of a square, if he does not come back with the other three, I will not repeat what I have done. Okay, so I'm going to separate this into three little sections here for us to break down. So, first is I will not give a person a boost or a start if he does not know the frustration of trying to solve a difficult problem. So, this frustration that he's talking about is the feeling of wanting to understand but not yet being able to. So, he's saying that if the student doesn't have a hunger for knowledge, really internally struggling to understand or like wanting to understand, but not being able to, then Confucius won't really tell them the answer. So, but if the student is really struggling and really wants to know the answer, but can't really get there by himself, he's super duper stuck, then Confucius will reveal or open up the way. And this is just because if you try to give out the answer, the entire answer, with the student just not doing anything at all, or not wanting to know the answer at all, then it'll be really, it'll just be essentially useless because it's just going to be another piece of information that the student will likely forget later on. But if the student really wills and actively tries to understand and tries to interact with what he has learned from Confucius, but just needs that one final push into understanding, then Confucius will give that final push. So after the student has exerted himself and done everything that he can, or just if the student has is really willing to learn and understand, then Confucius will open up the way. But if the student is just passively sitting there or not really caring about the subject at all, then Confucius won't really will just pause there and wait for him to actually start engaging with the material. And I do realize that this can't really be done in a classroom environment in like the school system, like the modern school system, because well, we're just following a curriculum and every day has an agenda planned. So essentially, if the student doesn't have a hunger or like an inner pressure to know the answer, then the teacher's explanation will just be it won't really sink in that deeply and it won't really affect the student as much. So, yeah. And then he says, or the frenzy one would get into when trying to put an idea into words. So that's being on the verge of expression, but like understanding or almost understanding the answer or the solution, but still just almost there, but still not really ready or prepared to articulate it into words. Then Confucius will help bring that those words into expression. And so both of these instances, this frustration and this frenzy of trying to solve a difficult problem and putting ideas into words, both of these are just Confucius helping or aiding the student put what he already has forming in his mind into kind of reality, as in a solution or just into words. So Confucius here isn't really giving out the answer as much. He's just putting in that final piece of the puzzle. And just a fun side note, the modern Chinese word of qi fa comes from these two verbs, which is the opening, understanding, and releasing expression. And this is just the give a person a boost or start in the translation. And so moving on to the last part, after I have shown a student one corner of a square, if he does not come back with the other three, I will not repeat what I have done. So imagine a square object with only one corner revealed by the teacher. So in other words, Confucius gives one aspect of the truth, or one example, or one clue, or just one piece of the puzzle, and then leaves the rest for the student to figure out. He doesn't show the student the entire square, but also at the same time he gives the student enough information to work out on his own. So, and this is because the student must actively learn and apply and really make connections and infer, and in order to actually learn something. So learning requires being active instead of just passively taking notes, and that often doesn't really go into our heads as much as actively trying to figure out which piece goes in which part. So when Confucius gives out one piece of the puzzle, he doesn't expect the student, and he doesn't want the student to just memorize and repeat his words. So again, learning must be active, and if the student isn't active, then Confucius will just pause and wait until the student does become active and actively start to complete the puzzle. So the overall theme is that the student can't simply wait for the teacher to do all the work for him, and he has to put in his own effort as well. And as for the teacher shouldn't dominate or disappear completely, but should have just give out just enough information. So if there's too little information, then the student will remain stuck. And if there's too much, then the student would just be passive and actually not learn anything at all. And if you give the right amount, then the student will learn perfectly. And so yeah, that'll be all today. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!